How's everybody doing out there? Peace and blessings to the hearers of the doers of the Lord's word. This is the Awakening Podcast. I am your host, Super Solid, and I want to go ahead and get into this message for the Lord. This is going to be on polygamy. This is going to be a topic on polygamy. I want to go ahead and cover this topic once and for all on polygamy, on what the Lord says about it. This is not, if you're not a Christian, you don't believe in Jesus, you're not spiritual, you don't believe in the Bible, then this isn't for you. Then just go about and live your life in all folly, and live your life as you see fit until it's over. But for those of us who want to know the truth and who want to live righteously, let me go ahead and give you the thoughts on polygamy from the Lord. Now, this isn't just my opinion. Everybody's debating on, is polygamy biblical? Because we have many men in the Bible who had multiple wives, but they had a lot of problems that stemmed from that. Many problems stem from multiple wives, and I'm gonna get into that. But let me go ahead and just give you Bible verse on proving to you how God feels about polygamy and multiple women. In the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 23, it says, "This is it," Adam exclaimed. "She is part of my own bone and flesh. Her name is woman, because she was taken out of a man. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife in such a way that the two become one person." God, when you find a wife, one wife, you bond. There's a bonding that goes on, a union between the two of you that in turn creates a spiritual union of one person. Meaning that you move on one accord. You two are partners. You two are 50-50 partners. You are partners in this because you become the one person. If you have one thing and you have another thing and you put them together to complete, if you have a half of one thing, a half of another thing, and you put it together and it creates a complete thing, that is the purpose of those two things. So polygamy, really, the purpose isn't there initially on the earth. Why? But if you have, just hear me out. If you have a love union between a man and a woman, if anybody who's been in a relationship, a loving relationship with a woman or whatever, a man, you understand that if you two really love each other and hit it off, that you become each other's best friend. You become each other's crutch. You become each other's psychiatrist, the person they can talk to. But at the end of the day, that is a union. That is a partnership and a commitment. A commitment between you two, a commitment that cannot be broken. When you add other people into it, it muddies up the waters, because unfortunately human beings they love people in different ways. Like, everybody not created equal, and when men get multiple wives, they can love one more than the other. Let me give you Bible verses on that. This is chapter 11, and let's start in. This is chapter 11, verse 3. And this is talking about Solomon, King Solomon. It said Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Like, Solomon was also one of the richest men to ever live on the earth. So this is another thing also, like, for rich men, polygamy is for rich men. That was for the tradition of it. I mean, we all know God is against it, but the tradition of polygamy is for rich men. You would have, if polygamy was going on today, you would have broke men trying to have multiple women. That's chaos. But it says, let's get back into the Bible. It says chapter 11, And this is verse 3. He had 700 wives, 300 concubines. And sure enough, they turned his heart away from the Lord, especially in his old age. They encouraged him to worship their gods instead of trusting completely in the Lord as his father David had done. Solomon worshiped all these other gods, Ashereth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the horrible god of the Ammonites. He even built, it said in verse 8, Solomon built temples for these foreign wives to use for burning incense and sacrificing to their gods. And it said Jehovah was very angry with Solomon because of this. Jehovah, the living God, the real God. He was angry with Solomon. And from now, Solomon was no longer interested in the Lord God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice to warn him specifically against worshiping other gods. But he hadn't listened. So the Lord said to him, since you have not kept our agreement, you have not obeyed my laws, I will tear the kingdom away from you and your family and give it to someone else. However, for the sake of your father David, I won't do this while you are still alive. I'll take the kingdom away from your son. See, that showed and don't get me wrong, Solomon was also messing with foreign women or foreign nations. God warned him not to do that also. But messing with multiple women, all of their input, all of their ego, that can come upon you as a man to influence you to do things. You know, if you look at, and I don't want to, you could look at brothers now, it's brothers that I see online who they have multiple wives. Those men can never have time. They never have real time for God. Those men too busy partying, taking many trips here with this wife, many trips here. They pull too many different ways to be effective for God. Those men are just secular, wicked men. You understand? And that's what they're going to be. They're influenced by those women. Regardless of whatever they say, there's multiple influences coming from one source to coming against one source. And it's hard for a man to resist that. You understand? Now, if you have a righteous man, he's led by God, and he has one woman, he has a wife, those two can build in their relationship, become one, and build their relationship in righteousness. She's not going to be able to just influence him to deviate from what he's already from serving the Lord. As a matter of fact, his presence and what he's doing for the Lord, his spirit is going to be stronger, so strong, it's going to overtake hers in the spirit realm and in the physical realm. When a man is usually the dominant force in the relationship, period. That's just how it is naturally. And I want to go ahead and give you some more Bible verses, though, that's proving the case against polygamy, that God is against it. Because it was allowed back in Jewish customs and things like that, there was purpose behind it being allowed. There was purpose for older women not to be widowed and not to have anyone to take care of them. There was no government assistance. There was nothing like that. You understand? And these were also conquered lands. When you have rich men, rich kings and things like that, they would have multiple wives. You also had in different tribes and things like this of people, these were their customs. You understand? You remember the Jews are the ones that brings the light of the Lord to the world. These other people were Gentiles. They had Gentile customs and things like that. But even the Jews, they were practicing polygamy. This was going on in the ancient Old Testament times. This doesn't mean God was in approval of it and thought that it was the best practice. This was just something that they were doing, and God is giving you now. He's teaching you what comes from polygamy. I'm going to give you multiple examples. 1 second. Okay, this is in the book of Genesis, chapter 21. This is a great example that you can use for today of how things could be if you enter into a polygamous relationship. So it said, then God did as he had promised, and Sarah became pregnant and gave Abraham a baby son in his old age. At the time God had said, and Abraham named him Isaac, meaning laughter. 8 days after he was born, Abraham circumcised him, and as God required. Abraham was 100 years old at the time. And Sarah declared, God has brought me laughter. All who hear about this shall rejoice with me. For who would have dreamed that I would ever have a baby? Yet I have given Abraham a child in his old age. So Sarah couldn't conceive for a long time. But then she was finally able to conceive and give Abraham a child. This is his wife. But as time went by, as the child grew and weaned, and Abraham gave a party to celebrate this happy occasion, when Sarah noticed Ishmael, the son of Abraham, and the Egyptian girl Hagar teasing Isaac. See, Ishmael is Abraham's son from this slave girl Hagar. So Sarah, his first wife, noticed that the son that he has and the Egyptian girl Hagar is teasing her son. She turned upon Abraham and demanded, get rid of that slave girl and her son. He is not going to share your property with my son. I won't have it. So now Sarah's then disrupted everything in Abraham's household, basically saying, look, get that son, your estranged son, and that woman who this so-called second wife you have, get them both out of my house. So the first wife is exerting authority over all of the others. You know, who has the authority? Like, if really ask yourself, in a polygamy relationship, who has the authority? It's supposed to be the man. But the women, are going to overtake that man. Like, it's the first, he's not going to be able to have a happy existence. Like, he's not going to have a peaceful existence. So Sarah told him to get rid of the slave girl and her son. He can't share the property with me and my son. This upset Abraham very much. For after all, Ishmael was his son too. But God told Abraham, don't be upset over the boy and your slave girl wife. Do as Sarah says, for Isaac is the son through whom my promise will be fulfilled. I will make a nation of the descendants of the slave girl's son too, because he also is yours. But God is saying two things here. God is saying, listen to Sarah, your first wife. She has the say. Get rid of your slave girl wife. Go ahead and like your wife is like Sarah told you to do, because I have a plan for Ishmael in his life. I'm still going to bless him because he comes from you. So what God is saying here is, I want to really break this down. Polygamy, and I'm going to get into other further Bible verses to prove this. Polygamy is not for the righteous men. Polygamy is for secular men, for rich men. Those are the only men who should even be considering it. Because it's not for righteous men who trying to serve God and do his will for their life. It causes it can pull you away from God. I just gave you that example. And it causes strife in your life that disrupts your peace and your walk with God. So this was disrupted. This upset Abraham. But God told him, don't be upset over the boy and your slave girl wife. Do as Sarah says. So Abraham got up early the next morning, prepared food for the journey, strapped a canteen of water on Hagar's shoulders, and sent her away with her son. She walked out into the wilderness of Beersheba, wandering aimlessly. When the water was gone, she left her youth in the shade of a bush and went off and sat down 100 yards or so away. And she said to herself, I don't want to watch him die, and burst into tears, sobbing wildly. So this second wife just was discarded off to go fend for herself and was nearly was at the brink of death. But it said, then God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from the sky. Hagar, what's wrong? Don't be afraid, for God has heard the lad's cries, and he is lying there. Go and get him and comfort him, for I will make a great nation of his descendants. See, God always makes good of our stupid devices and stupid plans. It's all God has an ultimate. Everything is going to work for God's ultimate plan. If you're a secular man, a man who don't believe in God, you already been committing adultery numerous times. You commit adultery, you already have multiple wives. You've been divorced 3 times. This is a form of polygamy. You understand? You've been divorced 3 times. In God's eyes, it is. You've been divorced 3 times. There is no divorce. You're committing adultery with your second wife. So let me go ahead and give you more Bible about this. Now, I don't want to give my opinion on this. I'm giving you, thus saith the Lord. I'm going to give you the complete picture of how God looks at these things. Because we see that multiple men of God in the Old Testament had multiple wives. Oh, yes. In the book of Deuteronomy. But understand, these were the guidelines and laws of men. This wasn't from the mandate of God. I just read that to you in the book of Genesis, was for man to leave his mother and father and cling to his wife, one woman. Adam and Eve were there together, and God said everything was good. He didn't add another woman. He said everything was good then. But in man's laws, the parameters of the Israelites and the Jews, this is what they said, the rules that they set. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 14. When you arrive in the land the Lord God will give you, and you have conquered it, and begin to think, we ought to have a king like the other nations around us. Be sure you select a king that is a man of God, that is a man that the Lord your God shall choose. He must be an Israelite, not a foreigner. See, these are parameters, of a king. Like, this isn't from God. This isn't saying that what you have to do to be a man of God. This is for the king. It said he must be an Israelite, not a foreigner. Be sure he doesn't build up large stables of horses for himself, nor send his men to Egypt to raise horses for him there. For the Lord has told you, never return to Egypt again. He must not have too many wives, lest his heart be turned away from the Lord, neither shall he be excessively rich. So the Israelite customs is saying he just must not have too many wives. You understand? So it's just saying wives. So in the Old Testament, under the law, yes, there was a legal allowing of men to have multiple wives. But God has already given you his take on it. He's already given you what was good from the beginning. And I'm gonna get into this verse from the these verses from the New Testament that solidify that God does not want you, a righteous man. He does not want his righteous to be polygamous. And let me get into that. Okay, now this is in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 6. And this is questions about marriage. Now, about those questions you ask in your last letter, my answer is that if you do not marry, it is good. This is the mandate from God moving forward from what we've learned. If you're trying to serve God, with your whole heart and your whole life, you look at nuns, look at men, women like that. He's saying that it's good if you can endure that. But usually it's best to be married, each man having his own wife and each woman having her own husband, because otherwise you may fall back into sin. So it doesn't matter if you want to be, you want to be practice polygamy. It doesn't matter if God approves of it or not. If you're a secular person, you don't believe in God, you don't care about making it to heaven, you don't care about doing God's will and making it to the end, what do you care if God cares about polygamy or he says it's okay or not? None of that matters to you. Go about your own way. But if you are a person who is a believer and wants to make it into heaven, God has told you. He gave it to you in Genesis, and here it is in the New Testament, bringing everything full circle. You could do whatever you want. You have free will. You can go sleep with multiple women. You don't even have to marry them. You could just go be an adulterer. You understand? You don't have to have multiple wives. But if you are choosing to follow God, he's saying it's usually best to be married. Each man having his own wife and each woman having her own husband, because otherwise you may fall back into sin. The man should give his wife all that is her right as a married woman. The wife should do the same for her husband. For a girl who marries no longer has the full right to her own body, for her husband then has the rights to it. And in the same way, her husband no longer has the rights to his own body, for it belongs also to his wife. So do not refuse these rights to each other. The only exception to this rule will be the agreement of both husband and wife to refrain from the rites of marriage for a limited time, so that they can give themselves more completely to prayer. You understand? This is how you should be living. Not a man worried about, oh, you can't sleep with me now, so now I'm gonna go sleep with my other wife. Or, you can't give me no sex, so now I'm gonna go sleep with at that time, nigga, you need to be going deep into prayer. You need, at the time of hiatus where your wife not busting the coochie loose, because your wife she'll give you all the coochie you need. And a man today in this day society can't even perform enough for one woman. A man and that's been since the beginning of time. Now they didn't have Viagra and all that stuff back in the day in ancient times. These men just had wives. They just were taking care of them. That's it. They weren't even getting pleasure from them. And that's the same way with a lot of these men today. A lot of men today don't even have the skills to pay the bills. So you definitely can't support 4 or 5 women, bro. Come on. And don't even get me started on relationships with women having multiple men. That's just a woman with a Jezebel spirit becoming committing adultery. That's all there is. That don't even exist in God's eyes. She's just committing adultery with multiple men. But it says that the only exception to the rule will be the agreement of both husband and wife to refrain from the rites of marriage for a limited time, so that they can give themselves more completely to prayer. Afterwards, they should come together again, so that Satan won't be able to tempt them because of their lack of self-control. I'm not saying you must marry, but certainly you may if you wish. I wish everyone could get along without marrying just as I do, but we are not all the same. God gives some the gift of a husband or wife, and others he gives the gift of being able to stay happily unmarried. These are all gifts. So I say to those who aren't married and to the widows, better to stay unmarried if you can, just as I am. But if you can't control yourselves, go ahead and marry. It is better to marry than to burn with lust. See, God has purposes for all of this stuff. We just be talking just yip, yip, yip. Well, polygamy, God said polygamy. Abraham had multiple wives. Solomon had this. Yip, 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 yip. But see, God is giving you how he feels about it. You can do whatever you want. At the end of the day, like he said, when Josiah, or Joash for that matter, Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. And in the days of Jehoiada, And in the days of Joadah, the priest, Joadah got for him 2 wives. He had sons and daughters. So there are men in the Bible who had multiple wives. David had multiple wives. And this was a man after God's own heart. But look at the follies and the things that David went through. David got his whole family household cursed. And this was all due to his lust for women and his multiple chasing these multiple women. If he had a if David had just stayed with his wife, with the 2 wives he had at first, just stayed with them, stayed with his first wife, and just never even, or stay with the women that God had assigned to him, he would have never gotten all the problems that he got into. God is telling you now in the New Testament, this is the continuation of God's plan for everyone. He's saying that not saying that you must marry, but certainly you may if you wish. I wish everyone could get along without marrying just as I do, but we are not all the same. God gives some of us gifts of husbands or wife, and others he gives the gift of being able to stay happily unmarried. So I say to those who aren't married and to the widows, better to stay unmarried if you can, just as I am. But if you can't control yourself, go ahead and marry. It's better to marry than to burn with lust. Now, for those who are married, I have a command, not just a suggestion. And this is not a command for me, but this is what the Lord, he himself has said. A wife must not leave her husband. But if she is separated from him, let her remain single or else go back to him. And the husband must not divorce his wife. It also says in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 12. Here I want to add some suggestions of my own. Now, these are not direct commands from the Lord, but they seem right to me. If a Christian has a wife who is not a Christian and she wants to stay with him anyway, he must not leave or divorce her. And if a Christian woman has a husband who isn't a Christian and he wants her to stay with him, she must not leave him. For perhaps the husband who isn't a Christian may become a Christian and help with his Christian and be the help of his. For perhaps the man who is not a Christian may become a Christian with the help of his Christian wife. And this is otherwise, if the family separates, the children may never come to know the Lord, whereas a united family may, in God's plan, result in the children's salvation. But if the husband or wife who isn't a Christian is eager to leave, it is permitted. In such cases, a Christian husband or wife should not insist on that the other stay, for God wants his children to live in peace and harmony. For after all, there is no assurance to you wives that your husbands will be converted if they stay. The same may be said to your husbands concerning your wives. So with that being said, this is showing that God has a purpose for everything. It's a purpose. If there is no purpose, you think about this. If the purpose for you trying to get in polygamy and do that is because of lust and things like that, then you're not following God. He not with that. Your purpose, because a woman, like I said, in this day and age, one woman, one man, they can have all of the sex they need to and satisfy each other as long as they, are doing what God just ordained them to do. Quit trying to withhold stuff from your partner, and you won't need anybody else to defile your marriage bed. Because when you add another party, that defiles the marriage bed. And in today's society, when most men speak of polygamy, they're speaking of having threesomes and adding a woman into their activities where they woman is, causing a woman to do homosexual things, with another woman. All of this is follows in suit. It's not just, just having a wife that I go, that I'm with one day or this and the third. No, these are people joining in. You defiling your marriage bed, fornicating, just being, introducing unnatural practices. Don't be surprised if your wife in turn dips out on you and start liking, what you can't give her. You've caused that type of energy. In the book of Hebrews, this is chapter 13, verse 4. Honor your marriage and its vows, and be pure, for God will surely punish all those who are immoral and commit adultery. So you have God, you have a way God looks at things, you have the way people looks at things. Right now, I've just read to you in the New Testament, I've given you multiple verses of how God feels about things. They constantly bring up, these prophets are familiar with the Old Testament. They're familiar that men have multiple wives, but they're telling you now the reconciliation of that. Those men were in folly, but this was also a custom of the time. This was not a custom of God. But see, the way God looks at things is he like, whatever. It's like, it's not good or bad at the end of the day, but it serves no purpose. It's not for his purposes right now. Like, there is no purpose of polygamy. That's not for God's purposes. You may see it as being a purpose, but there is no purpose for God. He's telling you now that it's better for you if you didn't even get married. You understand? Because all that's going to do, even one wife is going to take your time away from serving God in truth and spirit. You're not going to be able to make it into heaven. Your whole family is just going to be ushered into hell. You and your 4 wives and your kids, everybody. But he's telling you that if you must, you can marry one woman, cling to her as Adam and Eve cling to each other as in one flesh. You two that'll cause you to be able to refrain from sin. That'll be a gift for both of you, because both of you will be able to give your bodies to each other. You understand? You won't be caught up in this wild lust of the world and sinning. Dudes, what's the purpose? Your eye will never be correct. Because if you searching for polygamy, you constantly searching for a new wife, you constantly open to new sexual activity, to new relationships and commitments with another woman, you never gonna be looking with the correct eye. You never gonna have enough time to serve the Lord as you supposed to. And those women are gonna influence you and pull you away from the Lord. So if you don't care about that, you're not into what thus saith the Lord and his ways for you to move in order to best do his will for your life to get into heaven. If you don't care about that, why are you even caring about polygamy? You can just go off and do what Hugh Hefner did. Hugh Hefner didn't even ask permission. He's not asking, did God approve of polygamy? And I didn't even care. You understand? If you a secular man, go do what a secular man does. Go off and do that. But if you a righteous man who want to serve God, who want to fully be there for your woman, who want to experience that union between a man and a woman to become the one flesh, and don't want to add other parties defiling the marriage bed, don't want to have a bunch of problems that come from dealing with multiple women, then you listen to the Lord and you be a man of one wife. It's that simple. So I hope I covered that for you. With that being said, peace and blessings to the hearers and the doers of the Lord's word. This is the Awakening Podcast. I'm gone.